morning. I'm going to look like an absolute idiot if anybody sees me, but luckily I'm walking in the middle of the rice fields. I spend a lot of time in Bali because my kids go to school here. They go to the Green School, which is pretty cool. But anyway, I thought I'd take a leaf out of my friend Ned Phillips' book and record a video while I'm walking. I wanted to just put video on to some of my Substack articles, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why to be in a startup, why to start a company. And a lot of people ask me, you know, how to do it, and I wondered why people would do it. And I think that one of the things I said is just, it's a creative thing to do, and you should do creative things. You can start something. I know what it was like to be, I worked for KPMG for 8 years, and I knew what it was like to be in a corporate job. And it was cool, you know. I mean, I had a lot of people in there, I learned a lot. We had lots of, when you're in a chartered accountancy firm, you have lots of junior staff and lots of senior staff, so you learn how to deal with lots of people, and it taught me a hell of a lot of things. So sometimes say to kids, you know, go and work for a big company because they do lots of good training. But I think after a while, in the back of my head, I thought, I don't want to be old. I'm 50, that's old already. I don't want to be old and think to myself, shit, I should have started a company. And I think I wanted to do it because I wanted to do things my way, right? It's a creative thing that you're doing. You can create what you want, and you can sort of say, you know, this is how I want to do things. And I think that's born out of doing things. You know, when I was at KPMG, it was pretty good, but you know, I said, I have all these ideas, I want to do all these great things. And they were like, no, you can just go and, that's great, you have ideas, now go and do your fucking job. So I did my job, and you know, more and more I had these ideas, and it was sort of, no, you can't do those ideas. And so I quit and started my company, Tiger Spike. And God, it was fun. I spoke to some dude, and he said to me, one of my old people who used to work with, Nick Newman, he said, God, it was fun in the early days, wasn't it? And it really was. It was really amazing. Look at this. I don't know if you can see that. That's a volcano. So good. My morning walk's awesome. So I think, you know, one of the things that I wanted to do is, you know, really test myself. And I think that's what, there's nowhere to hide in the startup. We did this thing, me and Steve Kramer, who I worked with at KPMG, and we thought, hey, let's see if we can do no work for a whole month. And it was so stupid, like we was literally stealing from the company. And it's like a little joke that we had together, and see who can do nothing for a month. And it worked. We both did no work for a whole entire month. And you know, you can do that. I mean, you can hide and you can dodge work. And if you work for a big company and you're working from home, you know, I think you're trying to minimize the work you do. And you know, some people are, but it kind of sucks. And you think, well, that's not really, you know, one of these dudes I was talking to, Michael Matthew his name was, and he said, you know, if you're just working 9 to 5 and waiting for the weekend to come, that's not a life. You should do something else. And then that sort of hit home. And so I think starting a company is something everyone should do once. And if you wait for a long time, it's harder, right? I speak to a lot of founders, and they have a mortgage and kids, and you know, if they quit their job and make no money, they've got outgoings that they can't handle. So I mean, I started Tiger Spike in my late 20s. It's not a bad time. I think, you know, increasingly I think the formula is early 20s with a mentor, right? With a mentor who's an old fucker like me, like a 50-year-old. And I see this in Freddie and in Minikai and in Kiyoki and Kai. Those are young guys, and they've got a lot of energy. They call it fluid intelligence. And when you get older, you have crystallized intelligence, which means you can think of a lot of things that have happened in your life and put them together. And you know, I've been in startups for 30 years, and so I know what happens in them. And a lot of the time it's the same, right? People have the same issues in startups, and so I can help with those. But the nice thing, going back to what I was saying about having nowhere to hide, is that you really test yourself. And if you don't do a month of work in a startup, you really mess it up, right? You can't dodge work for a month. You have to, if you stop. I remember when I first started Tiger Spike and thought, Christ, if I don't do anything, we don't make any money. If we don't get any sales, there's no money to pay me or anyone. And you know, KPMG, you just waited till the end of the month and the money came in. That was, you know, fantastic. And in startup land, you got to earn it. You really got to work for it. And if you don't, you don't make it. So it's a nice test to see if you've got it. And I think people want to do that. And I would suggest do it. And you know, even if you find out it's hard and it doesn't work out, you've at least seen it, right? You understand more about business, and you have a bit more of a sort of an understanding of how, you know, how companies work. I think, you know, when you're in a big company, you think, oh, it's all right, money will come in and pay my salary, there's just money in this big account somewhere. But when you have a startup and it's your own money, you think, no money's coming in, you have to sell to get that. And that's kind of a nice lesson. So I think, you know, in summary, there'll be lots of different, look, you know, I think Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook because he got, you know, dumped by that girl and wanted to prove himself. And a lot, you know, there's a lot of guys who sort of do it out of anger, do it out of service. They really need to, you know, help some people, which is why Kyoki started Minikai, right? He really wanted to help, you know, his mum and other people like her. And so there's a hell of a lot of reasons, but in fact, I think the reasons don't matter. It's a creative thing to do. You should do it once in your life. Otherwise, you'll get to the end of your life and think, fuck, I should have done it. If you don't want to do it straight away, this guy who works for me, Greg Taylor, wrote this great book about being in startups as an employee, and no one really talks about that. But I think that's one of the stepping stones, right? So you could join like the first 10 or 20 people in a startup. You get a front row seat to how it's doing, but without having the stress of, you know, being the one who has to bring the money in. So I think there's no right time. It's something you do have to do. You know you're going to do it. And so the trick is to spot an opportunity, right? And if one exists, I had a band in Singapore, and then we reformed in Australia, and we were making ringtones, right, for this company that sold ringtones. And then my sort of business partner said, why don't you quit your job and start this as a real company? I didn't really give a shit about ringtones. I mean, I love music, it's my real love, but in the end I thought this is an opportunity. So I would say, if you're thinking of starting a company, be open to those opportunities, and if one comes along, do it. I've seen a lot of people who over the years had an opportunity and didn't take it, and I just thought, wow. I mean, we had some guys where I would, you know, our head of Europe, you know, I offered that job to a different person, and he spoke to his dad because he was a young guy, and his dad said, don't do it, stay with the big company. You know, and the guy who's head of Europe, when we sold, made millions. And it was a mistake, you know, for the other guy. And so I would say, you know, spot opportunities and take them, because you know it's going to happen at some point. I think doing it rather earlier is a little bit better than doing it later, although you can have people start later. There's plenty of 50-year-olds, you know, who start and do really well. You don't have to be young, but I think it's a bit easier if you're young. But like I said, you know, it's good if you have a mentor. So yeah, that's my summary. That was a bit rambling. I didn't really have any structure. I just took, as Ned says, just take an opportunity and make a video. So maybe this is too long. But I hope what the message that comes through is you should do it at one point in your life. You can either do it as a stepping stone by joining someone else's startup and then doing your own, or you can do your own. Spot an opportunity to do it. It's a creative thing, and it's a really nice way of testing yourself, because there's nowhere to hide. You can't do no work without the whole thing collapsing. So you've got to make it work. And there's something that feels amazing about doing it. I did the Sydney to Hobart in 2004, you know, in a small boat. It took us 5 days. I got seasick a lot, right? So I thought, fuck, I can't do this, I'm gonna get seasick. And so did the guys who owned the boat, Mark and Louis Rickmans. They're like, you can't come because you get seasick all the time. And I was like, no, seriously, I can do it. So I took seasick pills, and it was a really, really bad storm. And in the end, we got there 5 days later. Everything on the boat was broken. The guy who was running the boat, a guy called Olaf, later founded a company with his wife, which I invested in, just because he was such a monster. But afterwards, I just felt good. I felt that I had, you know, I wasn't the main character. Olaf was the main character, and so was Mark and Louis. I was a support dude, but I did my work. I didn't go down. You know, I didn't, you know, get sick, although that doesn't matter. And you know, we got there, and I felt proud of myself. I thought, look, I've tested myself in a massive ocean where half the boats turned around and some of them sank, and I did it. And startups is like that, right? If you're in the business world, startups is like that sort of adventure. So I think everyone should do it. So good luck, and let me know how it goes.